Today we're going to be playing Island Go Sam's Green White Enchanties deck. This deck is relatively new, all things considered. The most recent set gave us Ossification, which is one of the reasons why I think the deck is a bit better now because it has really efficient spot removal. That all it asks of you is to just play some number of basic lands. I think Ossification in general, just a really strong card. Definitely looking forward to seeing it in action in this deck. I feel like one of the easiest ways for this deck to lose is your opponent to play something like Shield Red, which just like punishes some of your card draw stuff, but it also just deals you a lot of damage for just like playing the game naturally. Having Ossification gives you that backdoor answer to those types of threats that a deck like this might not normally be able to handle. And you do it all for just 2 mana. It's just a great card. So let's go over the deck piece by piece, and let's talk about the things that matter a bunch and the things that don't matter very much. First off, I want to say that the Commune with the Spirits, this card is relatively new as well. Neon Dynasty came out last year. We have seen cards like this in the past, but Commune with the Spirits specifically, finding a land or an enchantment card, I think is really important. Now, normally when you see cards like this, they cost 2 mana. We actually had one back in Theros block, Commune with the Gods, I think. It was green and 1, essentially the same thing, but instead of land enchantment, it was creature or enchantment. And honestly, I think it's much worse. I think Commune with the Spirits in this deck specifically is excellent. Essentially just looks at the top 4 and you get to put one in your hand as long as it's not a Commune or a Rite of Harmony. Everything else it basically hits. Um, I think what this does is adds a level of consistency to the deck. You can keep hands that have just forest and a commune with the spirits sometimes because the commune digs so deep you can find those extra lands. Helps you hit basic lands for ossification, but once you have your mana set up, you start to dig deeper for your more impactful enchantments. You might need an answer for something, you might need a threat, and commune can find it all. Very similar to Oath of Nissa, for those of you who've been playing a lot of Pioneer lately. Next up, one of the first threats I want to talk about, Generous Visitor. For 1 mana, you get a 1/1, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. This card can really get out of control. To be frank, Generous Visitor looks kind of innocuous, but then when you actually get into the games, when you start reducing the cost of your enchantments and casting multiple spells per turn, that's where you're going to see Generous Visitor really stack up the counters and put a lot of pressure on your opponent. It feels almost like a throwaway creature sometimes. It reminds me a lot of Edgewall Innkeeper, where it looks like it's going to be medium, but then when you play it, it's kind of ridiculous. So keep an eye out for Generous Visitor doing a lot of extra damage and buffing our creature so that we can actually maybe attack in board spaces where it wouldn't be that great. Next up, the thread I want to talk about is Spirited Companion. Spirited Companion, obviously a newer card from Neon Dynasty, but one that a lot of people have come to really like because it's a dog. I like it because it draws a card. I'm a big fan of Elvish Visionary and things like that, and Spirit of Companion just follows suit, but it's also an enchantment, so it works really nicely alongside things like Generous Visitor and Commune with the Spirits. Um, Jukai Naturalist, an excellent threat that will reduce the cost of all your cards by 1, essentially. And if you get to untap with Jukai Naturalist, I think those are the games where you're just money. And if you untap with a Jukai Naturalist and you don't do something kind of disgusting on the next turn, you either mulligan a bunch or kept a weaker hand. I think that Jukai Naturalist is maybe the best card in the deck. Obviously it's not a payoff, but it is an incredible enabler. And things like this, when you untap with them, they just completely change the dynamic of the game. Your Spirited Companions cost 1, Ossification costs 1, Teachings of Kieran costs 1. It's just a really powerful card. But obviously it's vulnerable to things like Play with Fire or Cut Down. Next up, the threat. I do want to talk about Teachings of the Kieran some. I didn't even know this card really existed until recently. A lot of these sagas were kind of throwaways when they were first printed, but now it feels like a lot of them are finding homes, and we were just wrong about a lot of them too. Teaching of the Kieran, it's not quite Fable the Mirror Breaker, but for just 2 mana, you get a mill 3, a 1/1. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then on the third one, you transform it. And the backside is a 1/1 that whenever it attacks, you can exile a creature card from a graveyard, and when you do, you get a 1/1 color spirit token. Doesn't fly, keep that in mind. Kamigawa had some non-flying spirits. And then the second ability is exile target non-creature card from a graveyard. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So for 2 mana, this is a lot of stuff, right? It's not quite Fable, but it's very Fable-esque in what it's doing. You know, you're getting a 1/1, you're putting a counter on something, maybe making it a 2/2, and then when it becomes on the backside, you know, you can attack with a 2/2, or if your opponent doesn't have much going on, you can attack and make a spirit. All of that just works really harmoniously in the deck, and I think it's going to be good. Speaking of harmony, Weaver of Harmony, green and one, enchantment creature snake. Other enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1, and then you may pay a green and tap it to copy target activated or triggered ability you control from an enchantment source. You may choose new targets for the copy. This works with triggers from Ossification. It works with triggers from Spirited Companion. It let me double check the wording on it. So activated or triggered. So it works with all the sagas as well. So just a really cool card. It's very similar to Jukai Naturalist, except instead of generating mana, it generates extra virtual card advantage. So Weaver of Harmonies, you know, another one of those cards. If you untap with it, pretty good, but it's weak on the front side, so likely to die. But maybe we can eventually run our opponent out of removal, and maybe even just return it to the battlefield with Restoration of Vaganja. The biggest threat in the deck is going to be Catilda Dawnheart Martyr. For just 3 mana, you get a Star Flying Lifelink Pro Vampires, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and/or enchantments. It also has Disturb, and in the backside, it becomes an enchant creature that is essentially the same ability. This card is very scary sometimes in Pioneer, and I can only imagine how powerful it's going to be in this deck. You know, for just 3 mana, you get this huge flying lifelinker that has, you know, protection. Honestly, from vampires is pretty good because Blood-Tithe Harvester is like really annoying sometimes. So this thing does have protection from that. And then the backside, you know, you just threaten this huge burst of damage out of the graveyard. So big fan of Catilda. I think we're going to see it really shine in this league. Wedding Announcement. This is a tried and true threat slash engine card against decks like Rakdos or Grixis. We only have one main, but we have 2 more in the sideboard for when we do play against that deck. The maybe the most important card in the deck, Restoration of Ganja. It might not seem like it is, but you get to search for land, so you get to hit your land drops. You get to return things from your graveyard back to the battlefield when they die or get destroyed, like Jukai Naturalist. And then at the very least, you can just discard the planes that you found off of it, and it ramps you. So it kind of acts like a rampant growth of sorts. That's not obviously the best thing to do, but it's still pretty good. And then again, not quite Fable the Mirror Breaker, but it does flip into a 3/4 Vigilance. And then whenever it attacks or blocks, you create a 1/1 colorless spirit. So all these cards kind of working in conjunction, none of them doing any one thing particularly well, but all of them working well together. Lastly, the card that I think is probably going to be the best threat and the most important threat in the deck is going to be Hallowed Haunting. This is a card that I've tried in Pioneer before, and I didn't really like it much, but I don't think I had time to get it online. I think Standard is a place where you're definitely going to have time to get Hallowed Haunting online. And we're playing 4. Why are we playing 4? So for 4 mana, you get an enchantment that says, as long as you control 7 or more enchantments, creatures you control have flying and vigilance. So going back to not all spirits have flying, this deck actually makes a lot of non-flying spirits, so you got to keep an eye on that. When you do have 7 enchantments, the creatures 7 or more, the enchantments, the creatures you control do have flying and vigilance. But the money from this card says, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you create a white spirit cleric creature equal with power and toughness equal to the number of spirits you control. So essentially, you get an engine that makes pack rats. Every time you play an enchantment, you get a pack rat, and they get bigger, and they get bigger, and they get bigger, and they get bigger. I think this card's pretty incredible, and it is easily one of the reasons why this deck is good against Rakdos variants. So keep an eye out for Hallowed Haunting to do some really disgusting stuff. I think it's going to be good. We have sideboarded 1 Vanquish of the Horde. This is going to be a big sweeper against creature-based decks. It does blow up our stuff, but we can reset pretty easily with Hallowed Haunting. 2 more Wedding Announcement, mostly for Rakdos and Grixis. Touch the Spirit Realm. This is mostly generic removal along with borrowed time. These are just enchantments that can come in and interact with your opponent whenever we need to have some more removal. We have one Destroy Evil. This is going to be solid for things like the Mirror, but it's also going to be decent against Shield Red decks. Three Circle of Confinement. This is a way for you to exile small creatures. Occasionally, you'll hit a Blood Tithe Harvester with it, and then if they ever play another Blood Tithe Harvester, they take you gain 2 life, but that's not going to happen too often. This is mostly just kind of like a Journey to Nowhere style removal spell for you old heads, but for anyone who's played in a while, this is very similar to a lot of the enchantment removal we've seen, even ossification. Um, we have 3 copies of Nissa Ascended Animist in the sideboard. This is going to be just a generically powerful, go over the top threat for matchups where we know the games are going to go long. It's great in the mirror because it has the -1 to destroy an artifact or enchantment. The plus is going to be good against most opponents, just making large creatures. And then sometimes we're going to cast over 7 and overwhelm our opponent with the overrun ability. So excited to see Nissa Ascendant Animus in action. I've only ever cast it one time in Pioneer, and it was pretty good. Lastly, I want to talk about Rite of Harmony. This is a relatively new addition to the deck. And so Rite of Harmony it's a 2 mana instant. Whenever a creature enchantment enters the battlefield under your control this turn, draw a card and has flashback for 4. So this is like pretty expensive up front to just draw like a card or two. But when you have token generators going, Teachings of the Kirin, Wedding Announcement, Restoration of a Ganjo, Howled Haunting, Rite of Harmony starts to just be like a 2 mana draw 2 or a 2 mana draw 3 without much issue or trouble. So the reason why we're playing is because it works so well with Howled Haunting, and we have a third in the sideboard for when we just need to go really, really deep. This is Selesnya Enchanties. This is a deck from Island Go Sam. Let's play through League. See what happens. So first and foremost, I want to say that I think this deck is excellent. I think that this is a great choice for the current standard meta. I think it's very favored against most Rakdos variants. The ones with blue, I think, are slightly harder because the counter spells are quite good against you. However, you have so many little engine cards that it feels very difficult for them to keep up as far as card advantage is concerned, even in the face of Invoke Despair, Blade Cool Serpent, things like that. We had the plan. We had some removal for matchups where we needed it. We had Wedding Announcement and Hallowed Haunting for matchups where we need those. Ossification was excellent. I don't know if I would change a single thing. Rite of Harmony as a 2F felt kind of cool. Weaver of Harmony felt incredible whenever we drew it against the Soldiers deck last game. Overall, I think the deck's great. We didn't use the Nissa, but I think it's there for a specific matchup we didn't play against. Maybe we need a slightly better plan against Soldiers, but I think Soldiers is such an underdog to Rakdos decks that we don't need a plan. The Rakdos decks, I think, will just naturally chew those up. And our matchup against them is not that good, and I don't think that we can really change it that much. With that said, they do have trouble beating Catilda. And if you have an early Catilda against them, like if we had our Catilda in game 1 instead of mulliganing it away, I think we would have been able to win game 1. And in game 3, our opponent literally had a perfect curve and a perfect top deck to beat us. And I think without any of the perfect curve or the top deck, I think we could have potentially won. But that's magic. Our opponent had a removal spell for a creature and we died. It happens, right? Overall, though, I think this deck's A+. I'm excited to play more with it, and I'm excited to do commentary on it because I think the deck's great. This has been Selesnya Enchantments from Island Go Sam. Make sure to check out the deck list in the link description, and we'll see you next time. I'm Tandy, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.